where human insight trumps every trick. We're not hacking systems, we're hacking behaviors so you won't click. No complicated code, just tried and true brain science at play. Social engineering for good, the best defense is in your mind today.
Welcome to Phishing for Answers. The opinions expressed here are solely those of the individuals involved and do not reflect the views of their employers. Get ready, because the next live episode of Phishing for Answers is starting right now with your host, Joshua Crumbaugh, the CEO of Phish Firewall.
Psychology is the new firewall, where human insight trumps every trick. We're not hacking systems, we're hacking behavior so you won't click.
Hello, welcome to another episode of Phishing for Answers. Today, I'm here with Merlin Nameth. He is the CISO of the city and county of Denver. Hey, Merlin, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Joshua. I was kind of chuckling at the intro graphic with the downloading, because that just kind of reminds me of, like, I remember graphics like that early in my career. So,
Oh man, everything just an image on the internet used to just line
yeah.
by line. I mean, these kids don't know how good they have it.
Yeah, I remember, Microsoft Office was what, 15 3.5-inch diskettes installed on like a Windows 95 system back in the day.
It was, yeah. I remember
So,
that. And the
yeah,
operating system itself was like 20 discs or something. It was nuts.
it was crazy. So as Joshua and I are talking here, it's like, yeah, I've been doing this for a long time. I actually kind of stumbled into technology originally. I was a psychology major in undergrad, and I think it's about my junior year I started working in a student computer lab, and this was, again, this is like dating myself and Joshua, because I'm sure that you remember those days of WordPerfect for DOS, and
Oh,
it's on it.
word perfect. Oh man, talk about blast from the past.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, you are dating us, aren't you?
yeah,
Go ahead,
exactly.
continue.
Yeah, and those run on a Novell network, and so I was mostly like helping students with, like, oh, I'm not sure how to do this in WordPerfect, or they have printer jam on dot matrix printers in the computer lab, and yeah, I just had an interest in technology, and then when I went to grad school, I got yet another non-technical degree, so I got a master's degree in social work. And when I went to school there, so when I started in the fall, this was in the 1994 is when I started there. The social work department had just got wired up for Ethernet that summer, and they had someone who was assigned to help all the professors with this newfound technology and being connected to the campus network. And she didn't have much technical understanding, and so I come along like, hey, I'm looking for a work study job, and she's like, you're hired. So I did that, and that helped me continue to learn more about technology. And then when I graduated, I'm like, I have the social work degree, or technology, and I just decided I wanted to stay in technology. And so I started off in the IT side. I learned a lot. Every place I've worked, I've learned a lot. Learned a lot on supporting the campus network. Different issues that professors and other people had with their systems, and I just really had an interest in that, and then just decided to direct my career that way in technology.
Very cool. And in cybersecurity, when did that kick in, or how did that happen?
Yeah, so I was thinking, it's like, well, I'm going to get what was that called? CNE, I think, right? The Certified Novell Engineer. And I was like, oh, those people are really cool. I think I really want to do something like that. And I was working for a large distributor, and the biggest technologies that they distributed were Sun Microsystems. And so back in the day, I got pretty good at Sun Solaris. I was working that job as a phone support, and so we mostly supported resellers when they had issues, or larger customers. They would come to us before they would go to Sun for help, and and then being in a, if you have worked for like reseller or distributor, that part of their agreements with different vendors is that they have to have so many people who are certified in their product to be able to properly support that from both a pre-sales and a post-sales perspective. And they sent me the Checkpoint Firewall 1 4.0 class, and I was like, "Ooh, this is really cool stuff." And that was my pivot into security, was taking that Checkpoint class.
Okay. That is the first time I've heard of anyone getting into security thanks to Checkpoint. But jokes aside, no, that's very cool. And that was sort of, I think, the story for a lot of people where they were in technology and there was this need, and that's how they stumbled into it. So you're fairly new to the city and the county over there. How's it going so far?
Yeah, it's going great. I've been here for just a hair over 4 months now. It's great. It's a very large, complex environment, but we have some really good things in place from a security standpoint, and there's other things I'm doing to help continue to build on what's in place, to continue to grow and mature it, because I think, as we both know, that security programs can't stand still, and so you always have to be innovating and looking for ways to improve.
I couldn't agree more. Well, really, really good information. So, uh, as we talked about before this, the topic, or the general topic for Phishing for Answers, is the human element of cybersecurity. Of course,
Hmm.
that is a very, very big area. Are there any aspects of human error that you found yourself focusing on, maybe more than others?
In terms of human error, you said?
Yes.
Oh, I think it's really falling for like phishing emails, or people. Uh, I always approach that people want to do the right thing. Most people don't seek out to do the wrong thing, and people are just trying to do their job. They're trying to accomplish what they're being paid to do, and sometimes they don't know what the right thing is. And so I think that's why it's so important. And as you and I talked before, that it's just so important to build those relationships. When I got into security in the late 90s, early 2000s, security was really known as a department that would just tell everybody no, that no,
The
you can't do
Department of
that. No, you can't do
No.
this. Yes. And shockingly, I actually know that of security programs are still that way. I don't think that they're very effective, because the thing is, like, if you're just telling people no, they're going to find other ways to be able to accomplish their
Mhm.
job, and they're just going to circumvent security. And
Yeah,
you
I
definitely don't
would
want that.
have.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Not just would have. I mean, but at one point in my career, before I found cybersecurity, I'm happy to say I was part of the problem. But it's interesting. I can go back and sort of look back on my behavior and almost inspect it just through memories. It's
Hmm.
interesting to say the least. So you talked about how you don't want to be the department of no. You really want to work with the user. So I think that really leads to one of the most common questions I ask on this program: carrot or stick, and why?
Um, I would say it's a little bit of both. I think carrot, because to the point that I made before, of like, I think people are, most part, trying to do the right thing. They're just trying to accomplish their job. Stick, because you're gonna have people who um, just don't want to do it. And some of the biggest resistance I receive is software developers, because they're like, well, I need to run this on my system, and I need to do this, and I shouldn't have any security on my system because it's impeding me from doing my job. And again, I don't want to just tell them no, but we do find creative ways to be able to keep their system secure, provide them with extra training, be like, hey, if you're going to run like a web server on your work laptop, here are some things that you need to do to keep it secure, so that way you're not patient zero in a security incident.
Oh, absolutely. And I think those developers who that's not an uncommon problem. What you talk about across the board, developers do tend to be one of the weaker links in a lot of organizations. Not because they're trying to be, not because they're careless, just because their jobs have, really, really high demands
Hmm.
and generally unrealistic deadlines on almost every project. And as a result, they're focused on getting this across the finish line, maybe not necessarily security. And so the last thing they want is not to have
Hmm.
local admin on their computer, so they can't run this, they can't install this, Python module. They don't want to wait a week to have IT go, push it either. So I get it,
Exactly.
but that's also the reason I think that they need that much more training.
Hmm.
In fact, I've been working on some training, and the whole concept behind it was how do we break OWASP top 10 into 1 minute every week of the year, or 1 minute or less that we can hit them with every single week of the year, just to make sure that they're continuously learning and updating their knowledge base, and I gotta say, I mean, there's a lot there. It's very difficult to do that, and I think for most of the developers, a top 10 list sounds easy until you dig into it, and you realize
Yeah,
that just injection alone has 10 subcategories or more.
exactly. And what's that really mean? I mean, it's like you read some of that stuff, and unless you're really in the weeds on it, you may not understand what that's really pertaining to. Um,
Yeah.
you know, and listening to you share, it reminded me of a story that I often share in different presentations I've given at conferences of an example of when I really partnered with IT. And so I was leading the security program for an organization, and I was one of my initiatives was to harden systems. And IT was actually on board with me. They weren't pushing back on it. They're like, "Yeah, that sounds good." And when I talk to IT, when I first approach them on a lot of things, I'll be like, "Here's how it can help you as well," because a lot of things that we do in security also helps with overall hygiene of the overall environment and systems and networks. And so, if I can find that there, and of course, I'm not going to just make up something. I mean, it has to be something that's actually true, or else they're going to see through that and just see them just trying to manipulate them. But yeah, so this particular situation, we wanted to start applying some scripts to harden systems, and of course we're going to start with development first, and then move to the QA environment, and then production. And IT was like, we're completely on board with you on this. However, we don't have enough capacity in our backup system, and we're only backing up production systems. And we're just really afraid that you take down development systems with this. That's going to take us a long time to rebuild those, and it's going to impede the developers doing their job. And so I asked IT. I'm like, well, what do you need, in your backup solution to be able to back those up? And they're like, well, we need to go get quotes. So they went and got a quote. They came back and it was $25,000. And I said, yeah, I'll just pay for it out of security budget. And they're like, really? You'll do that? I'm like, yeah. So again, I was just partnering with them. With I helped them solve their issue. Of course, I earned closer allies, in IT
Yeah.
to be able to do security initiatives I wanted, and I was able to accomplish what I needed to from a security standpoint.
I think working with and building bridges, not barriers, is one of the most critical things that we can do. And I mean, it's in our anthem. What is one of the most common things that we hear in cybersecurity? It's security is everyone's responsibility. And I think that just that alone tells us we've got to be talking to everybody, because at that one person we don't talk to, that one system we don't learn about could be the weak link that inevitably gets exploited and lets them in. So
Well,
um
and it's also about being strategic and thoughtful with how you build relationships with people as well. Because if people are afraid to come to security to report something, they're just not going to do it. If they feel like they're going to be talked down to, or demonized, or they're going to be turned into their boss and they could be reprimanded, you're just not going to build that cohesiveness that you need with people across the organization to report security incidents, which maybe this is something that they observe, maybe it's a mistake they made, but they should feel safe coming to the security team.
Yeah, yeah. And if they don't feel safe and they don't tell us, hey, I just clicked on that, I typed in my credentials, the time between when we detect it and when it happened could be very, very costly. And
Exactly.
so something that's still debated in this industry, less and less, and I think I know what side of this you're on. But the three strikes policies at companies where if you click on one fish, you get remedial training. Two fish, you get like this heavier remedial training and maybe lockdown or something. Three fish in a year and you're fired. What's your thought on programs like
Well, Joshua, it's kind of scary because I would say that you're like watching my email before coming on your show because I actually had an email come to my inbox. And I'm like, it was something I mean, this literally happened in the last 30 minutes. Had an email come to my inbox and I'm like, I'm not sure. I wasn't expecting this. So I'm looking at the links. I'm like, well, the links look legitimate, but I'm still not sure that I want to trust this. And in my current role with the city and county of Denver, I report to the CIO, and she had received the same email and forwarded it to me. She's like, "Hey, is this a phishing email or not?" And really, what I conclude with, I'm like, it seems kind of weird that we both received this. We weren't expecting it. The links look okay, but I still don't trust it. And so I told her, I'm like, well, I'm just going to submit it as fish, and then my team will analyze it and see. So I submitted it as fish, and it did not come back saying it was a test fish email. And so then my team will dive into it deeper and see. So it actually might be legitimate, but I'd rather just err on the side of like deleting something that was good. And it's like if this happened to come from a vendor, it's like if they need to reach me, first of all, they need to make their emails not look like they're phishing emails, and then and then resend me something where I'm not going to question it, because it did look a little fishy. And it's frustrating because like you get some of those, like I get stuff via text, and I'm like, this looks really suspicious, and I'm not even going to click on this at all.
that? I mean, I had one yesterday that I still don't know about. I need to just reach out to CrowdStrike. But I get this email from CrowdStrike saying that I've been added to a case. So I go into my portal, I check there's no cases open. I look at the email, I'm like, okay, did this actually come from CrowdStrike? Because now I'm questioning it because the email itself
Yeah.
looked really suspicious. But sure enough, it's validated, even as the blue check mark next to it saying, oh, this actually came from CrowdStrike. Still haven't figured it out. Definitely reported it as a fish, but no, I hear you. So what do you think? I mean, do we fire people for failing 3 times?
I don't know. I think it depends. I guess I'll give the legal answer. It depends. I mean,
It's a
if this
safe
is
answer for sure.
if it's a chronic abuser and you have documented evidence that someone's a chronic abuser, then yes, by all means, they just, they probably likely are a very small percentage, but they just don't care, and they're just going to click on anything. But like this email that I got this afternoon, and that's kind of my point. Is like, even I've been doing security for over 26 years, and it's like I wasn't quite sure. I mean, my gut tells me it's probably legitimate, but I still didn't trust it. And so it's like, me with all my years of experience, if I don't know, then how can we expect other people whose jobs are not in cybersecurity? How do we expect them to always know?
So I have this theory. Take vaccinations. What do? We take a virus, we weaken it, and we inject it into the human body to teach our body how to defend against it. So we all understand how that works. I see phishing simulations as part of our awareness programs as building those antibodies, if you will, within your body.
Hmm.
So you run a simulation they learn really well how authority, urgency, and a few other tactics are going to be used against them. And now, because they've learned that hands-on, they have those immunities.
Hmm.
And so when they see it, it's gonna happen more often than not at a subconscious level. They'll move on and they won't actually engage. So I have a theory where I think that we can train people, we can get people better. And I don't think you always can know because there's times that you and I don't know. Is it real? Is it not?
Yeah.
But I think that's where a well-trained user is not going to engage. They're just gonna report it
Hmm.
or delete it and move on. But I don't think
Exactly.
we should fire people for clicking. I One of my favorite stories, we, actually, before we got, investing, our strategic had deployed our technology and our training to, some of its users. And they ended up, investing in the company. Why do I mention this? Because about 2 years later, I am at a company board meeting, the annual meeting, and one of my worst offenders, biggest chronic clickers, comes up to me, uh, and she's just the sweetest lady, and she says, "I'm trying so hard. I'm sorry. I don't mean to click." And I knew her because she was at the top of every report for clicking
Oh,
on the most fish.
yeah.
And I think at this point she had like 6 over the course of a year. But what it showed me was, and I don't always get a chance to talk to those people, right? And so you might think that somebody that clicks on 6 or 11, I mean, we've seen 11 in a year. That's the record so far. Don't anyone try and break it, please. Um, but I did get a chance to talk to her, and it showed me that she really did wanna try and do better. She really was trying. It was just an area where she struggled. And I think a
Yeah.
lot of times for those people that do that, it's their process. They click on every link, they open every email, they delete
Hmm.
every, they've got, like, the cleanest inbox you've ever seen.
Yeah, exactly. And so, as you're talking, it remind me. So my wife is a public educator, and she's like, it's hard to like teach teachers. My wife says that, she's been teaching for a
I'll
number of
bet.
years, and and their time, is so strained, and so they're running from thing to thing to thing, and so it's really easy for them to be distracted, let alone maybe not like really care about that because they're there to teach kids. And I think that also goes into like being in security for this many years. I have many pet peeves. One of my pet peeves is about our security awareness. How we approach security awareness training is that we're just telling people what to do. And it's like, well, Josh, you want me to just tell you what to do? It's like, you're probably like, oh, no, don't just tell me what to do.
Start with
And but
why.
yeah,
Start with why.
exactly. Why? And also like I think that security, and it's getting better, but it's still not to the point that I think it needs to be. Where we need to show people like, here's what could really happen if you clicked on a malicious link in an email. Here's what just really step people through what that actually looks like. I think that we are getting better because I think it is a success of our industry that most people in the general public know what a phishing email is. I think that's huge. That most people know what a phishing email is. That's great. I
We're getting
mean,
there.
yeah,
Well, I mean, I would hope
and
everyone gets them. I mean, there's what, like 4 billion a day or something like that? It's just this god
yeah.
awful number.
So I think that that's a great success of our industry that the general public, by and large, knows what a phishing email is. Are they able to like accurately? Well, they're I would say with some precision, they're able to identify because a lot of people are, if you're working for a corporation, you're getting that kind of phishing training. So, which really helps. So, but
So
yeah, I just think that we have to stop just telling people what to do and just really show them here's what kind of impact that your actions can have. Like clicking on a malicious link could cost your organization $100 million in an incident and fines.
yeah.
People don't really understand that the consequences can be very large.
Well, and I think that's the reason we have to take incidents that happen and communicate them outside of management, outside of the cybersecurity team. Not shame anybody. Probably, I mean, I wouldn't even connect anybody to it, but it's, hey, somebody from the accounting team had this happen to them. Because it's a lot different when it's one of your coworkers than when it is, some big corporation or someone from on the other side of the world, or even just 10 miles down the road. It still doesn't connect the same way it connects when
Hmm.
it's one of your own. And I think that's the reason that we have to communicate these things. I think, though, normally lawyers are involved and they're like, we tell no
Yeah,
one.
exactly.
um,
But I agree because that can be a missed learning opportunity, and it resonates a lot more because I think even still there's a lot of organizations that are like, well, that'll never happen to us because we're not you know city and county Denver
I still hear
that's
it.
out there in news.
We've been doing this for 30 years. We've never had a problem. Um,
Exactly.
but I mean, I know a guy that said that exact same thing, or really just, uh, how do I word this? I guess they had a little bit of that opinion. They had done it that way for a long time, and so it really wasn't questioned. And then they had a ransomware incident, and the biggest thing that he said was, everyone needs to take this seriously before it happens, because once it happens, you've got very limited options. And it's true. I mean, once it happens, you have to decide, do I fund them to attack me more, and get my data back, or do I lose the data and have them go sell it on the dark web? There aren't any real good options there. And even
Hmm.
at that, um, I got the opportunity to help them start to, or really start building up their defenses, and I guess cut the bleed, if you will, or fix the issues. And 41 days later, they tried to break back in.
Yeah.
The exact same ransomware group, after they had been paid, not as much as they initially demanded, but they never are. But I mean, 41 days, that's how long
Yeah.
they waited. And I mean, we're talking tens of thousands of endpoints that had to have a lot of work done to them, and in under 41 days. So,
Wow. Yeah. Well, and
well,
and like I think Brian Krebs is like is like you're dealing with criminals, and so it's like even though you're like going to pay, it's like are they going to hold up their end of the agreement to not share on dark web? You don't know.
yeah,
But
well,
they
and
can
we're
still
just funding them. They've got the
yeah,
revenues of CrowdStrike with zero overhead. Well, maybe not zero, but they don't have the overhead of CrowdStrike, that's for sure. And so we're
yeah,
we're making them stronger every time we pay.
exactly,
So
exactly.
I'm very much against paying, but the reality is sometimes you have to. But there's the other reality. Sometimes you can't. What if the Department of Treasury has them listed as a terrorist organization?
Yeah,
You cannot legally pay them, or you are funding a terrorist organization. And that's all the more reason to be, to get ahead of it, because there may not be an option to pay at all. And then your data is definitely going out there. It's definitely being sold on the dark web, because that's how they make money when you won't pay. They sell your data. By the time you find out about it, your data's in their hands. It's gone.
exactly. Well, and that's my strategy has been for every security program I've run since ransomware has been an issue. Is of course I focus on defensive controls, but I also focus a lot of time and attention on restoration, making sure that I have immutable backups, and just making sure that we have good
You
processes in
recover
place for being
quickly.
able to backup systems. What's what are the most critical systems that would have to get stood up first, and um, yeah, I spend a lot of time on that because, look, I mean, the nation state threat actors, they're very determined, they're well funded, and they will get by your security controls. You need to have good technology, good processes in place to be able to recover from that.
And one of my pet peeves around that is I hear everyone talking about the nation state. And albeit the nation state threat is something you have to worry about, and the 0 days that come with it. But most 0 days, like 99% of 0 days, are mitigated simply by hardening your systems.
Hmm.
And when you look at the 0 days, they exploit default configurations almost all of the time. And so when I look at that, the best thing that we can do to protect against that threat is just simply make sure that we've actually looked at the configurations on our systems. Do we have broadcast, any broadcast protocols turned on? Well, that's a problem,
Hmm.
and so we look at what we have and we harden it as much as possible. Um, since we are running low on time and you brought it up, I used to have a segment at the beginning of this podcast. 40 episodes ago, but I stopped asking this and I removed the segment because no one had any pet peeves. But it was that, what are your pet peeves? And I felt like anyone who's been in cybersecurity long enough has pet peeves. I know I do. But you mentioned it earlier, and I would love to find out a little bit more about those other pet peeves.
Yeah. In addition to what I've mentioned about security awareness training and security departments just telling people no, is I don't know when this started a few years ago that people were like, well, systems have to be aligned to the business, which I don't disagree with. I mean, you need to be aligned to the business, but I just see that a lot of people fall short on that. And here's what I mean is that a lot of people approach it being aligned to the business is that, well, I understand how the company makes money. I understand, the business side of how things run, but they forget like the most important aspect of that, which is relationships.
Hmm.
And it's like you have to build relationships. As a CISO especially, I need to build relationships across the organization. In my current
Yeah.
role, city and county Denver is huge, so I'm still working on building those relationships. But I'm building relationships across our various agencies and departments because those people, and I know it sounds arrogant to say this, but it is the reality is that they need to know who I am. I need them to know who the CISO is and what my team does because,
Do.
again, they're the eyes and ears of what's going on in the environment.
And you need to know what they do because while there may
Yes,
be the overarching, business objective, each and every department has their own individual objectives and tools and processes and methodologies, all of which can bring risk to the organization. And you have to know about those. And that doesn't happen without talking, without building relationships.
exactly. And yeah, so that's one of my pet peeves is if people just seem to think being aligned business is that you have an MBA and that you understand how your organization makes money. It's like, well, that's part of it. I mean, that's not wrong, but you need to build those relationships and earn trust. Because I don't come in, like coming in with Seeing County Denver. It's like people just didn't trust me initially. It's like it's not that they distrusted me, but I needed to prove myself and I needed to build those relationships.
I think that's anywhere. I mean, just naturally, as
Yeah.
humans, we distrust before we overly trust.
Yep.
That does tend to be most people. Where like if it's somebody random, and particularly if you've never met in person, if you've never like seen the person's face, like you do tend to be a little bit more, I don't know, standoffish. But I mean, then again, we have jobs, particularly me, because people are overly nice and predictable, right? So,
Exactly.
um,
I guess another pet peeve, if you want me to go into another
oh
one,
yeah,
if you
no,
want to
let's
move on.
keep doing pet peeves. We'll stay on this
Okay.
for a while.
Oh, I could talk for hours on that, doing this was all. I think another one is our relationships with our vendors. And so every time I start a new job and lead a new security team, I always tell my team, and you could ask the people who are working for me. I'm here at St. County Denver. I've been here for 4 months, and they've heard this from me. Is that I tell them that as much as we want our vendors to be a partner to us, we need to be a partner back to them. Um, I have some vendors, some resellers I've worked with for literally over 20 years. And because there's a lot of trust there and they understand what I'm trying to do, wherever I'm working, they understand what my goals are and my pressing initiatives, and they don't keep trying to get me to buy other stuff that's either I already have covered with another product, or it's just not part of my roadmap for that year.
Yeah.
The vendors that are really pushy, I'm just turned off by. It's like, I've been doing this a long time. It's like, I'm looking for you to partner with me, and that goes true. Like, I've actually told resellers this, that it's called value added reseller, and I said, I'm paying a little bit of a premium, by buying through you. Now, of course, some vendors will only sell through the reseller channel, but some vendors, you have a choice of going through a reseller channel or going direct. And I tell them, it's like, I'm buying through you because of the value added part. And the value added part is, while I'm in a sizable organization here in my current role, that still, like, I don't know, you've mentioned CrowdStrike. CrowdStrike will listen to me if I have issues, but if I'm going through like a nationwide reseller, they're going to listen more closely to that reseller, because if they don't treat me well, then that reseller is like, well, we're not really comfortable with this vendor, and we're not sure we're going to recommend your products anymore. So yes, I'm looking for that relationship, and it has to be bi-directional.
I mean, I think the uh, vendor CISO relationship really does have to be a partnership to begin with, and it starts with relationships. I mean, if there's one thing I've learned as a vendor, I don't get business from people that I don't already have that relationship with, or somebody in my organization has a relationship with. Maybe not me personally, but I do think that's really important, and understanding what are your objectives, what are your problems that you're facing, and being able to articulate what value you bring to the table as well. So,
Hmm. Yep, exactly.
I-
And that,
oh, go
I
ahead.
was going I was going to jump to another pet peeve, unless you had another comment
No,
on that.
no, I like this. Let's keep on it.
Okay.
Let's keep it rolling.
Another one is just the egos in security. Oh my gosh. It's like,
Oh, there are some big ones. I mean,
there are some
gigantic.
big ones. There are some big ones for sure. And that's been true like my entire career. It's like, I was, when I started off, and it's like, man, I'm a word perfect stud. I don't know. I don't know if I ever thought that myself, but yeah, I know I had an ego when I started off, and then it's kind of cool, because like when I got into technology and got into security, that was really more in the infancy stage. Now, of course, technology had been around for 20, 30 years before that, but things just really like took off, like starting in the 90s. And so I just feel very fortunate that I am the age I am, that I've able to ride my career on that. But yeah, and I always like to when I get a chance, I always like to bring up the story. So I think I may have mentioned this to you, Joshua. Like, I was friends with a dear friend of mine. His name was Michael Asante. Um, a lot of people probably don't know the name, but most people are going to know what he did. So he worked at Idaho National Labs years ago, and he was the brainchild behind the Aurora Generator project. So this is where they so just really quickly, they had the generator on the power grid. So Idaho National Labs has their own power grid, so they can do research on it. And so they put this generator on the power grid, and Michael's goal was to demonstrate what would happen if an attacker got into systems on the power grid, what they could actually do. And so through something like 20 lines of code, they were able to manipulate that big diesel generator, where it was like fully on the
They do a
power grid.
harmonics attack or something.
Yeah, it's basically, that's what it was. Is that it was it's under full load on the power grid, and then the code like just abruptly took it off power grid. So then, of course, the engine just over rev because it no longer was under load. And then like a second layer, then throw it back on the power grid. So they did that like 3 or 4 times. And you can go on YouTube and see videos of this. It's really fascinating. You see like parts thrown, coming off the generator, black smoke. And so Michael really made a name for himself with that. And he
That's
spoke to
similar to
people.
Stuxnet. I mean,
Yeah,
how we
yeah,
that yeah.
exactly. And so Michael, he literally spoke to members of Congress, world leaders about concerns with security around OT systems, ICS, and power grid. And unfortunately, we lost him about gosh, it's about 5 years ago now. Oh, geez, I guess we're going on 6 years. Sorry about that. Wow, time goes by. So, yeah,
doesn't it?
so we lost him 6 years ago to his battle with cancer, and the day after he passed away, he was recognized on both floors of Congress for his work in cybersecurity. It was like, wow, what a huge honor for just an
It is.
incredible individual. And I was unfortunately only friends with him for just a few years, and I didn't know all the stuff that he did because he just wasn't arrogant and wasn't like leading with like, well, look at this. I was published here, or I was on this podcast, or I spoke at RSA, I was keynote, or I mean, he just didn't really talk about those things. I had to Google it to figure out all the
Yeah.
things that he did, and I'm sure I still don't know all the things that he did.
Well, I gotta say,
And so
some of the
there,
most influential people in our industry have been some of the most humble.
yeah,
And some of the most arrogant. Well, there's been some really big names that have been arrogant too, but I don't know. I think the real movers and shakers, the true changers, not just the big names, but the ones that made a difference, that made change.
yeah.
To me, all of those that I know of were always all very humble, and I think that it almost takes that to get beyond a certain point in cybersecurity. Sure, ego gets you into cybersecurity probably in the first place. But to get past a certain point, you really do have to get over that and then become a little bit more humble. And I think that's part of like being a CISO is understanding that too.
Well, and I think it's also self-awareness. Like, since I got into cybersecurity when it really started taking off, it's like, yeah, I tell people it's like when I first got into it was easy. We had, network firewall, we had antivirus on our endpoints, we, patch systems, and we had free snort. That was basically it. That was our security program, and we had some policies. And things have gotten so complex now. It's like, I mean, I think it's made me even more humble because there are so many things in cybersecurity that I might have a cursory knowledge of, but I'm never going to be a true expert in it. It's just so much, it's so vast. And so, yeah, I think people who are very, very
And
ego
we're about to
driven,
add
I'm like,
quantum to the mix on top of AI. I mean, as if
yeah,
we didn't have enough to stay on top of. We've got
yeah,
supercomputers for $3,000 that sit on somebody's desktop.
yeah.
Um, it's insane. I'm excited though. I mean, uh, are you gonna buy yourself one? The NVIDIA supercomputer?
I don't know. It is tempting. I'm sure at some point I will.
I mean, to me, just the ability to put a very large LLM on there, and
Yeah,
really have all the world's knowledge stored and compartmentalized. If anything happened, you've got all the world's knowledge right there.
exactly. And that's one of the reasons why I'm in security. I love, it's kind of a love hate relationship, more on the love side than hate, but it's like everything is always changing. And I, over the course of my career, I've gone from being a CISO to not being a CISO, and yeah, being a CISO is hard. But I found that I actually enjoy that level of stress because it just, you're just always like learning and adapting and trying to find creative ways of solving solutions. And I think that, whether you aspire to be a CISO or you want to be, a really good engineer or architect, you have to have that desire to learn. It's always continuous learning. Like
I think
I've taken some
anywhere
AI
in
class.
technology
Yeah,
nowadays, you have to have that, because it's
exactly.
changing so rapidly.
Absolutely. And, like I've taken some AI classes and I'm planning on taking some more because I don't feel like I have a good level of knowledge on AI. A few years ago, I took some AWS classes and some Microsoft Azure classes because I want to learn more about cloud. And I ended up into a job where we were very much heading towards the cloud. And so, that really helped. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
you just have to have a desire to learn and keep learning.
For me, I've been looking at a, quantum class that MIT has. But I mean, I think, all of it is just incredibly fascinating. Like, to me, the most interesting part of all of this AI, or generative AI, that's changing the world as we know it, is that it was unintended. It was an unintended consequence. All we were trying to do was make a better autocomplete. And so we just kept feeding more and more information, and until all of a sudden we had something that was way beyond it. And of course the goals changed. But to me, where it started and its origins being a little bit unintended, I find that part very fascinating.
So for whatever reason, my mind went a whole different direction when you were saying that. It's like, so it's almost like, you remember like in the earlier versions of Microsoft Office where you had Clippy. Do you remember Clippy, the
Yes,
help?
yes, Clippy. Oh, it was terrible, but it was awesome.
Yeah.
Enhanced.
So it's almost like AI is Clippy on steroids,
Yeah.
right?
Well, what Clippy was intended to be actually exists now, and
Yeah.
getting better every day. Like, I mean, the deep research tool that OpenAI has, um,
Yeah.
really, really good. Gemini's is good too, but I'm a little bit more impressed with the quality and the chain of thought on the OpenAI side of things. But it's interesting. I love how DeepSeek came in and forced everybody to lower their prices. Because with GPT-5 that they're talking about, it's going to be mostly free and we'll have all of this
Yeah.
built in. So that's at least one thing that DeepSeek gave us, aside from an open bucket. But did you
Yeah.
hear about that?
I think I know what you're referring to, but
Yeah,
go and
they just
elaborate.
left all of their data wide open,
Yeah.
and so people were able to get at it. It's been secured since. Sort of like never mind, I won't mention any government websites that were recently left wide open either. So,
Yeah. Exactly.
well, we are out of time here today. Any bits of advice, bits of wisdom you want to leave the audience with here today?
Um, it's been a great journey. Like I said, I like to learn. I continue to learn. I think if I guess that's my biggest piece of advice for someone to be successful in cybersecurity is just always be curious and always be learning, and you're going to do really well in this field.
Agreed. And honestly, that curiosity's fun. You get to go play with new toys. Like
Yeah,
I saw this AI video generator that tonight I plan on using. You give it a picture, you give it a video, and it'll merge the two. And so and it does it really well. So like I can put myself slam dunking, on an NBA court or
there you
like
go.
you if you can imagine it, you can make it. And I don't know. There's some really cool stuff out there these days. It's fascinating to
Yeah,
watch
exactly.
this industry grow.
Yeah, exactly. And I would challenge everybody. It's like, be like Michael Asante. Go make a huge impact on the world. I mean, his work really has had an impact across the world. We have reliable electricity in part because of his research and being out there talking about the threats to the electrical grid. But also be humble like him, because people are going to approach you more, if you're humble, and work with you more and collaborate with you.
Yeah, I agree. Well, hey, thank you for joining us today. This has been a fabulous episode. For everyone joining us remotely, thank you, and we'll see you again tomorrow.